Just the maid's daughter, quiet, unseen, and often ignored. But when a world-famous polyglot stumbled over a rare language no one could decipher, all eyes turned to her. In seconds, the air shifted, from curiosity to disbelief, from ignorance to something darker. Because the girl they dismissed, the one they never listened to, began to speak fluently in a language scholars had spent decades trying to decode. It was just another quiet morning in the city's wealthy district, where marble floors gleamed and every word echoed like it mattered. For most people, this world was untouchable. But for Elena, it was where her mother worked, scrubbing, dusting, and making sure other people's perfection stayed spotless. Elena was 16, bright, curious, and far more observant than anyone gave her credit for. Every day after school, she'd sit in the kitchen corner, finishing her homework while her mother mopped the halls of the grand estate owned by Professor Alden, a world-renowned linguist and polyglot famous for his ability to speak over 30 languages. To him, Elena was just the maid's daughter, a shadow passing through his perfect world. Yet, as she listened from the sidelines, language wasn't something foreign to her. It was a rhythm she understood naturally. Words, accents, tones, she soaked them in like music. Her mother often joked that Elena was born speaking in more than one tongue. But no one outside their small apartment believed that. In a neighborhood where success was measured by skin tone and pedigree, a young black girl's intelligence rarely made the headlines. Elena's world was simple. She loved books, especially ones in languages she didn't know yet. She'd borrow old, dusty dictionaries that Professor Alden's assistants threw away and hide them in her backpack. Each night she'd whisper strange syllables under her breath, learning, repeating, and connecting dots no one taught her. It wasn't about impressing anyone. It was about curiosity, a hunger to understand. Her mother, Rosa, worked tirelessly. 2 jobs, no complaints. She believed silence kept them safe. "Stay polite, stay quiet," she would whisper. "People like them don't see us unless we speak too loud." Elena obeyed, most of the time. But she also wondered, why shouldn't they see her? Why should her voice stay buried just because of where her mother worked or the color of her skin? Then came the day that changed everything. The mansion buzzed with unusual energy. Reporters came and went. Boxes of ancient books arrived in wooden crates stamped from countries Elena had only read about. Professor Alden had received something extraordinary, a manuscript written in a forgotten tongue, believed to be one of the world's rarest languages. Scholars from across the globe were calling, desperate to help decode it. But none could make sense of the symbols. Even Alden, the man the world called the human dictionary, struggled. Elena watched quietly as he paced the study, muttering words she couldn't quite catch. She noticed patterns, though, shapes repeating, symbols echoing familiar sounds she'd once heard in an old recording online. It was almost instinctive, like recognizing a melody you've never been taught. Still, she said nothing. It wasn't her place. Days passed, tension growing in the house. The professor's frustration filled the air, snapping at his staff, demanding silence as he worked. One evening, as Rosa polished the brass handles in the study, he sighed and said to her dismissively, "You wouldn't happen to know anyone who can make sense of this, would you?" Rosa laughed nervously. "No, sir. We don't know things like that." But Elena did. Something inside her whispered to speak up, to say she recognized the rhythm, the structure. But she hesitated. Her mother's warnings echoed in her mind. Don't draw attention. Don't speak unless asked. Still, that page, those words called to her. And when fate finally forced her to reveal what she knew, the truth wouldn't just surprise them. It would shake their entire idea of intelligence, privilege, and race to the core. Because the girl they'd overlooked all along was about to show the world that brilliance has no color. The moment it happened, It felt like the world froze. Professor Alden was standing at the center of his study, surrounded by stacks of papers and open books. His assistants hovered nearby, whispering about funding deadlines and failed translations. Rosa had come in to serve tea, Elena trailing quietly behind as always. The professor mumbled something under his breath, frustration spilling over. "It's useless," he muttered. "A mystery no one alive can solve." And then, without thinking, Elena spoke. Her voice was soft at first, trembling. "That symbol, it's not a word. It's a sound marker. It changes the meaning of the next phrase." The room went silent. Every head turned. Rosa's heart dropped. She knew that tone. When rich people stopped smiling and started questioning why someone like them dared to speak. Professor Alden squinted. "Excuse me?" Elena froze. She hadn't meant to interrupt. But now, with everyone staring, she couldn't stop herself. She stepped closer, pointing to the parchment. "See this sequence? It's a tonal pattern, like in old Niger-Congo languages. I think it's phonetic, not symbolic." For a second, Alden looked stunned. Then disbelief hardened his face. "You think?" "My dear, this is a script linguists have studied for years. You expect me to believe a maid's daughter can see what I cannot?" The assistants laughed quietly. Rosa reached for Elena's arm, whispering, "Enough." But the damage was done. The professor's pride was bruised, and Elena's voice had crossed an invisible line. He asked her to leave the room. Not gently, not politely, and as she walked out, cheeks burning, she heard the words that cut deepest, murmured, but sharp enough to scar. "Stay in your lane." "Intelligence doesn't come from dusting my shelves." That night, Rosa cried quietly at the kitchen table. She begged her daughter to stay silent, to forget it happened. "These people don't see us as equals, baby. You give them one reason, and they'll make sure you never walk back through that door." But curiosity doesn't die easily, especially not when it's tied to dignity. Over the next few days, Elena began studying the script in secret. Late at night, she'd sneak into the study after cleaning hours, tracing each symbol, cross-referencing with patterns from ancient African dialects she'd read about online. The more she worked, the clearer it became. She was right. When the professor discovered her one evening, hunched over his notes, his expression twisted with fury. "You've been touching my research?" Elena stood her ground. "I'm sorry, sir. I just wanted to understand. I think I found something important." He didn't listen. He saw only defiance. Within hours, Rosa was fired. They were told to leave immediately. No severance, no goodbyes. The next morning, rumors spread that Rosa's daughter had stolen private notes. The lie spread fast, feeding on prejudice, twisting truth into shame. But truth has a way of resurfacing. A week later, an academic paper surfaced online under an anonymous account, an accurate translation of the mysterious text, detailed and precise. It shocked the linguistics community. Scholars debated endlessly about who could have cracked the code. Only one person knew the patterns well enough to recognize them. Professor Alden. His pride began to crumble. He quietly tested her theories, and every one of them was correct. The revelation should have humbled him. Instead, it enraged him. How could someone like her, a poor black teenager, succeed where he, a decorated scholar, had failed? He reached out publicly, claiming he had made a breakthrough. He presented her work as his own at a conference, smiling for cameras, applauded by peers. But what he didn't know was that someone had filmed the night he'd fired Rosa, had caught every word of his anger, every racist insult. The video began circulating quietly among his students, gaining traction online. And as the truth started leaking into the light, the world began to question not just the man who took credit, but the system that allowed it. Because Elena's voice, once silenced, was now echoing far beyond that mansion's walls. And this time, no one could shut her up. The truth came crashing down faster than anyone could contain it. The leaked video spread like wildfire, shared, reposted, dissected frame by frame. Professor Alden's cold, dismissive voice filled screens everywhere. Stay in your lane. Intelligence doesn't come from dusting my shelves. For millions watching, it was more than just a quote. It was a mirror held up to a world built on quiet, polished cruelty. Elena woke up to chaos. Messages flooded her phone, some cheering her courage, others filled with venom. Her name trended for all the wrong reasons. The maid's daughter who shamed a scholar. Some called her a fraud, others called her a hero. But deep inside, she wasn't thinking about fame or revenge. She just wanted the truth to stand where lies had buried it. Meanwhile, Alden faced mounting pressure. Universities distanced themselves. Sponsors pulled out. Still, he doubled down, denying everything, claiming the video was taken out of context. At a live televised interview meant to save his reputation, he smiled confidently at the cameras, rehearsed charm dripping from every word. "I've dedicated my life to studying languages," he said. "And I alone cracked that code." Until the interviewer interrupted him. "Then how do you explain this?" On the studio screen appeared a document, the original translation Elena had written, uploaded anonymously, time-stamped weeks before his so-called discovery. Beneath it was the metadata linking the file to a small, outdated laptop, the one Rosa had bought secondhand for her daughter's schoolwork. The silence was suffocating. Alden's composure cracked. Cameras zoomed in on his face as sweat rolled down his temple. For the first time, he had no words. His empire of intellect, built on arrogance and theft, collapsed in real time, witnessed by millions. But the victory didn't feel like triumph to Elena. The world's attention turned toward her, ruthlessly, relentlessly. Reporters camped outside her apartment. Strangers debated her life on television. Some praised her brilliance. Others dismissed her as lucky or coached. Even when the truth was proven, her worth was still questioned. It wasn't just about the manuscript anymore. It was about who society believed deserved to be brilliant. One evening, as the sun sank behind the city skyline, Elena and her mother walked past the mansion they once cleaned. The iron gates were locked, the once grand house now empty, quiet, almost ghostly. Rosa stopped, staring through the bars. "You see, baby," she whispered. "They tried to silence you. But look, this silence belongs to them now." Elena looked at the mansion, remembering every insult, every moment she was told to stay quiet. The ache in her chest was heavy, but so was the strength she felt growing there. The next day, she was invited to speak at a youth conference about racial inequality in academia. The auditorium was packed, lights blinding, cameras rolling. She hesitated at the podium, voice trembling as she began. "I used to think knowledge belonged to people who looked a certain way, talked a certain way, came from a certain place. I thought my words didn't matter. But truth doesn't care who speaks it. It just needs someone brave enough to say it." The room fell silent, not out of politeness, but reverence. In that moment, she wasn't just a maid's daughter. She was proof of everything the world tried to deny, that genius, power, and dignity can rise from anywhere. As she left the stage, applause thundered through the hall. But beyond the noise, a question lingered in the air, echoing in every heart that heard her story. If brilliance can come from anyone, why do we still choose who gets to be seen? And with that question, the fight wasn't over. It had only just begun. When the noise finally faded, the interviews, the headlines, the viral outrage, what remained was quiet. A different kind of quiet, the kind that comes after a storm. when the world doesn't quite know what to say next. Elena and her mother moved out of their small apartment into a modest place near the university. It wasn't luxury, but it was theirs. For the first time, Rosa didn't have to clean someone else's floors to pay the rent. And for the first time, Elena wasn't walking into rooms as the maid's daughter. She was being invited as a voice the world wanted to hear. Her translation work was officially recognized by an independent academic board. Universities that once ignored her name now reached out with scholarships and offers, but Elena didn't rush to accept. She had seen what those walls were made of, how they could elevate some voices while silencing others. She wanted to choose differently. She wanted to create spaces where children who looked like her could learn without being told they didn't belong. So, instead of chasing prestige, she founded a small foundation in her neighborhood, the Voices Project, dedicated to teaching young Black and brown students the power of language, history, and identity. In those small classrooms, brilliance wasn't measured by credentials or accent. It was measured by curiosity, courage, and the willingness to be heard. But even as her life transformed, Elena carried the weight of what had happened. She learned that racism doesn't always wear hoods or shout slurs. It hides behind polite smiles, academic titles, and words like merit and qualification. It pretends to doubt your intelligence when it's really afraid of your potential. And that truth, more than anything, changed how she saw the world. Years later, when Professor Alden attempted a quiet return to academia, the world wasn't as forgiving. His legacy was no longer about how many languages he spoke. It was about the one truth he tried to bury, and the girl who refused to stay silent. He retired in obscurity, a name often cited not as a pioneer, but as a warning. What happens when arrogance meets justice? And Elena. She kept speaking. In classrooms, online forums, documentaries, everywhere her voice could reach. Because her story was never just about her. It was about every person who had been underestimated, overlooked, or erased because of the color of their skin. It was about the cost of silence, and the power of finally breaking it. One evening, after a talk at a university that once denied her mother a janitorial promotion, a young girl approached her. She was shy, nervous, clutching a notebook. "Ms. Elena," she said, "I want to be like you." Elena smiled softly. "No," she said. "Be better than me. Speak louder. They can't ignore all of us." And that, more than any award, headline, or apology, was her victory. Because the world had seen what it tried to hide. That brilliance, empathy, and courage are not limited by race or class. They're limited only by those too afraid to see them. So as the video fades, as viewers sit in silence for just a moment longer, the story asks one last question. How many Elenas are still unseen, cleaning the rooms where greatness is being discussed, whispering ideas that no one hears? Maybe it's time we started listening. Because until we do, stories like hers will keep repeating, and the world will keep pretending it doesn't understand a language it was never willing to learn.